In 1974, Martin Amos's first novel, written when he was only 24, called The Rachel Papers, won him the Somerset Maugham Award, an award that his father won for Lucky Jim 20 years earlier. Emerging from the long shadow of his father's pen, he has established himself as one of the leading prose stylists of his generation. His witty and some say demonic novels, such as Money and London Fields, satirize the materialism and avaricious tendencies that consume modern culture. In his latest work, The Information, Amos depicts the vicious envy and incorrigible ego of the literary world that has recently made him the subject of its scrutiny. I'm very pleased to have the author of The Information join us this evening for a conversation about this and about some of the controversy that swirls around his writing of it and how much he got paid. Welcome.
All right.
Tell me about this. I mean, it is, the book is about envy. One writer's envy for another. One writer who thinks he writes well about another writer who he thinks writes commercially. But tell me about the envy you have experienced because you got the amount of money you did as an advance for this novel.
Well, I mean, envy and jealousy never appear in that form. They appear as aggression, hostility, scurrility, etc. So I've just been through the ringer of the British press. And it's not for me to say that it's all inspired by envy, but it seems that envy played a part. But it's not a simple matter, and it's by now for me a very wearying matter. But the amount of money involved won't strike Americans as particularly, formidable.
For someone who is ranked as one of the best novelist in his country.
Sure, but if I wrote junk, no one would mind me getting a lot of money.
Of course not.
The paradox is,
and in fact, people who write junk get a lot more money than you.
A lot more money than that. No, it turns out, and I'm grateful to have learnt this from the British press, that there's only one activity that you're not allowed to get well paid for. Anything else is fine, but writing serious fiction, it turns out, is something you shouldn't get paid a lot of money for.
Are you surprised?
Oh, I'm sort of intrigued by that. But the thing is, it can't be explained as straightforward envy, or it's a British phenomenon. In fact, I could spend an hour talking to you about it, and you still wouldn't be, it couldn't be satisfactorily explained to you how all this hostility has blossomed about this book. Because you need to be English to understand a particular network of well, anti-Americanism is one theme of it, because I'm identified with America and England. The idea that I'm a writer's son, and therefore it was just like, taking over the family pub. It was no work for me to become a novelist. All kinds of resentments that, it would take a computer to log, flowered up around this book.
Let me go through it quickly and then get to the book itself. As to what's happened to you. You demanded, or your agent did, £500,000. You got it. In the process, or thereabouts, in the process, you changed agents. You were going through a midlife crisis, which I'd like to hear more about. You left your wife.
No, well, that was all that had all happened. That aspect of the midlife crisis was over by the time this deal happened. But it was true that it could be identified as another, series of sunderings and changes of course.
Yeah. Tell me about the midlife crisis.
Well, I think this book is about a midlife crisis,
right.
And it almost performs a midlife crisis itself. It even has a midlife crisis, this book.
Well, there's amazing art. I mean, this is about envy. You've experienced envy. This is about a midlife crisis. You've experienced a midlife crisis. It's about, some say, rivalry between friends. You've experienced that.
Yeah. No, a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies and postmodern ironies come together in this book. But I think the midlife crisis, I used to think before I had one that the midlife crisis was just a thing that happened to weak-minded chumps who didn't have the bottom and the backbone to, get by without a midlife crisis. Now I believe that actually midlife crises are structural. They're to do with your whole life. They're intrinsic. They're to do with facing things that haven't been faced. What gets them going, the midlife crisis, is an hysterical overreaction to the certainty, the certain knowledge that you're going to die. And I think, you know, one of the definitions of youth is that you think death and decay is something that happens to other people, but, you know, you think, one part of you thinks, funnily enough, in my case, it's not going to happen. Although you're intellectually persuaded that it will, a bit of you goes on saying, well, you know, it's just a rumor as far as I'm concerned. But around about 40, the jig is up, and you have to join in with the great communality of those who are going to die.
And you know.
And you know, and you react. Some people's midlife crisis can be solved by going out and getting a little sports car, and then you come roaring out of your midlife crisis at its wheel. Others, you know, take longer and, you know, are longer and messier to resolve.
And you?
Well, my life has changed in lots of ways, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I do feel that it's kind of been and gone now.
And when you felt it, it seems to me from reading the book and reading about you, is that you wanted, beyond questions about mortality and the sureness that you were halfway there, say.
More than halfway.
More than halfway, depending on your genes and other factors. That you wanted to know, where do I stand and how much am I worth and how do they measure where I've come?
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't the money. It was more to do with thinking, you know, I'm never going to be 45 again. I perhaps will not write another long novel. You know, I am supposed to be one of the leading writers of my generation. And you say, well, you know, what does this entail?
So what's the problem, Martin, is what I say.
Yeah. Well, also, let's have a look at the figures and see, you know. And having been very incurious about money and earnings and so on, I didn't open a bank statement for 15 years because I knew that if I was in money trouble, someone would tell me.
Yes.
I had no intrinsic interest in money. But then I suddenly just thought, well, let's find this out. And it was a desire that you can set within the midlife thing, in that you just want to know where you stand and, you know, what have you got. And it all, I guess, stemmed from that.
And that's why you requested the amount of money you did. That's why you changed your agent in pursuit of that. That's why you left your wife?
No, nothing to do with that. That happened 2 years ago. No, all these things can perhaps be subsumed under the heading of the midlife crisis, but they were discrete events.
And separate?
Separate events. What happened really was that confidentiality in the deal was lost instantly, and suddenly it was all over the papers, and I was in a very exposed position. And I was kind of being set up by the press as this, you know, greedy big head. In England, they don't like you to, you can't be serious and successful at the same time, artistically serious and successful at the same time. It's a contradiction. You know, if you're going to be serious, then you live in a garret and you eat baked beans straight from the can. That's the sentimental view of how you do it. And they also believe that publishers are twinkly characters who love fiction and poetry. They don't seem to have realized, you know, even more was satirizing that view 50 years ago.
Yeah.
They don't seem to realize that publishers are now owned by Homer the Whopper and Andrex toilet paper, and that it's a business like any other. So it was seen as offensive, whereas in America, I imagine, it would just seem realistic.
Okay. You made the deal. You've got the book. It's been well reviewed. What have you learned, and how did you come out of the midlife crisis?
I think I came out of it just like anyone else, really. That
you got up one day and...
These events and the glare these events have been unfolding in have seemed, you know, not very central to me in my life. I think I got over it the way we all do, where you think, you come out of your midlife crisis, I'm exaggerating now, and you think, well, I've still got this leg, and this arm works some of the time, you know. I've still got this ear. And you think, you patch together what you've got, and I'm talking, you know, about emotionally too, and you think, well, you know, it's not that bad, you know. And then you settle down for the next leg. The thing is that Milan Kundera has said that we're children throughout our lives because every 10 years we have to learn a new set of rules. I think that's a good remark, but I think it's that learning a new set of rules is spectacularly true of the midlife. That when I was 40, when I was 39, I thought I knew everything. I was even almost bored by the transparency of everything and how clear it was to me. And then suddenly I was pitched up on the shore of the midlife. And I thought, I don't know anything anymore. I've got to learn all this stuff anew. And that's a frightening thought, but it's an exciting thought too. And you do pick up these sort of hints and pointers about how you can live the next half of your life.
Are you then on a new journey?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. I've learnt the language. I can now use the currency. I can get around on the tube train in this new land.
What was the... I read somewhere that you said, you know, that it's both painful, you're happy about things and you're also sad about things. You're happy that you came out of it. You're happy that you learned some lessons. You're happy that you're on a new journey. Yes?
Yes.
What are you sad about?
Well, I'm sad about the sunderings that have, you know, for one reason or another proved necessary, or at any rate have happened.
Long-term friends?
Friends, you know.
Don't speak.
Friends, family, wife. You know, I've had to make, you know, I have children, I have had to make all those adjustments. You sort of realize that all those childish promises about everyone staying together forever and ever and ever, you know, aren't going to work in your case, and perhaps don't work, you know, work in very few cases.
Didn't work in your father's case.
Indeed.
He left your mother and then later said, you know, I think every day about wishing I was still married to her.
Yes, indeed. So coming to terms with those, you know, long-term disappointments has made me sadder. But, you know, I feel I have arrived in this in the new country of
Do you
middle age.
know what the next hurdle is for you?
No, I don't. It all feels unknown out there now. But the next hurdle will be the next novel. That I know.
Will be the next what? Novel?
Novel.
Yeah. What brought you to write about this? Why did you want to write about envy, literary envy, and a kind of the crassness of the publishing world?
Well, I don't think you know, I'm a satirical kind of writer. So once I get going on something, I search for the comedy, and that usually lies in exaggeration, in satire, in militant irony. But why do I? Novelists, it's a great common misconception that novelists choose their subjects. They don't. What they do is recognize the subjects, and the subjects really choose them.
Out of life experiences, or?
No, it's almost like an internal birth in the head. Nabokov described it just as a pang. Lolita came to him as a pang. And it can just be a sentence, it can be a character, it can be a situation. And all you know about this pang is that it's your next novel. And you might not even like the look of it. You might think, Jesus, do I really want to write about this? You know, in my case, do I want to write about the Holocaust? And this is a rhetorical question, because you know you have no choice, that this is your next, this is what you're going to be doing for the next couple of years. So I got the idea, and I thought, you know, okay, I'm going to write about writers. And it was, in a way, it was a response, I suppose, to, I can now see that it was a response to feeling all this interest coming at me personally. I mean, people are much more interested in novelists than in novels, I now believe. It's much easier to be interested in a person. It's quicker, you know. You can just read a profile and it's done.
Right.
So I thought, why are people so interested in writers who don't do anything? You know, novelists just sit at their studies. They're grinders. You know, they sit there year in, year out, writing this stuff. Nothing happens to them. Why all this interest? What's he really like? You know, etc. So I just thought, you know, okay, if you're that interested, here it is.
Yeah, it's more because they're tied to the culture and they're windows on the culture and they write about the culture and we all live within the culture, and writers are one of those sort of icons that are out there, you know, reflecting. And we're seeing it through them, and therefore we become interested in them in the same way that we become interested in people, you know, who play sports or on television, or who become well known for going to the moon.
Yeah. Oh no, I can see where the interest comes from, but where does it go? You know?
Yeah, but my sense of you is that that this is not something that you given a moment of concern to. In fact, that to know something about you, and having interviewed you before, is that it does not bother you one whit that there is a fascination with the novelist as well as the work itself.
No, it doesn't bother me, but it gets noticed by me. So it was in that spirit, really, that I said, you know, if you're interested in writers, here they are. But of course, mangled and stretched and exaggerated in the usual way I go about it.
Yeah. Who did, you mentioned Nabokov, and I know Saul Bellow, and whose work has influenced you the most in terms of?
Those two strange Russian novelists, because Bellow, in a sense, is a Russian novelist. He happened to be born on this side of it.
Right.
But they're both Russians. They both
Russians in
birth.
In birth.
Yeah, and Russians in temperament, in that their novels, it seems to me, are grown up. You know, they talk about what it's like to be alive in their time, and they try to tell the truth. There's a candor and adultness about them, particularly Bellow in this regard, that I respond to.
Your relationship, again, back to the personal, to the novelist rather than the novel, your relationship with your father has always been very good, and there's probably nowhere, I guess, anywhere, in which there are two people who parallel lives, who are living, and who have
got bodies of work
out there. Yeah. And
no, it's very weird. It both underqualifies me and overqualifies me for writing about writers, because writing isn't at all strange to me as a way of living, because I was born into a house where there was one, and nothing is more banal than what your dad does every day. You know?
Yes.
So when I became a writer, it just felt like a very natural thing to do, and it means I don't get the highs and lows of authorship. I don't sulk. I don't gloat, because it's...
And to have written is not like the greatest thing in the world for you, because
it's what Dad does. You know. So it's been, people thought it must have been very difficult to get started. On the contrary, if you get started straight away, you shouldn't brood about it too much. You shouldn't sort of see the unlikelihood of being the writer's son of a writing father. Because if I'd looked at the stats, I'd have said, well, forget it. It just doesn't happen. But I got going straight away and never gave it any thought, and it's always seemed to be a very natural way to live.
Did you have to cross over this mountain which says, you better be damn good, because you come from a very successful father, so you better be good. Don't come out here trying to trade on your old man's name, son.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, you don't get that. At first you get gently treated, because people think it must have been tough for you, mistakenly in my case. What you get, in my case, is that after you've been around for a bit, people are beginning to think, why doesn't he shut up? Most writer sons of writer fathers write a novel or two, a couple of, tremulous short stories, and then shut up. But it's a bit much if you go on and, book after book. And I think it does get on people's nerves. You're not meant to do that.
And so then when you build on, when that's the foundation, and then all of a sudden this kind of thing explodes with all the talk about the book before the book even hits.
Yeah.
You really are ripe as a target.
Indeed. Yeah, and that's certainly how it's proved.
What's next? I mean, when you begin this new journey, have you started work on the next work?
I'm writing short stories at the moment, which are kind of like a holiday from a novel. Novels are long, and long novels are very long. And they take, more and more out of you as you get older. You find that the stamina, is what you're suddenly short of. So I'll write some short stories, and then I'll write the next novel.
Is there much difference in the New York literary world and the London literary world?
I don't know the New York literary world that well. And it seems
but
to
you
me,
know a lot of the players because
Sure.
they came over here from London.
Well, there are big differences, like, English people are very homogenous.
Yeah.
They're all, white,
Right.
for instance. Now we have
less and less so.
Now we have got some what we call Commonwealth writers who've liberated us all in lots of ways, I think, in us novelists. But we all like each other. We all get on. We all vote the same way. In America, you've got a 2-foot Alabaman and a 9-foot Cape Codder, and one's from Lithuania and the other's from Libya. And these people have got to get on, and they don't get on, and they beat each other up and sue each other and resent each other more because America's a more competitive society, and that's reflected in its writers.
What does your dad think of this?
I don't think he's got through it.
He hasn't got through it?
Well, he said he reads thrillers. He said a long time ago that he said, I'm never going to read another novel that doesn't begin with the sentence, a shot rang out. And that doesn't begin with the sentence, a shot rang out.
No, it certainly does. I assume Louis and Jacob are your sons.
Yes.
And to the memory of Lucy Partington. It goes, cities at night I feel contain men who cry in their sleep and then say nothing. It's nothing, just sad dreams or something like that. Swing low in your weak ship with your tears scans and your sob probes, and you will mark them. Women, and they can be wives, lovers, gaunt muses, fat nurses, obsessions, devourers, exes, nemesis, will wake up and turn to these men and ask, with female need to know, what is it? And the men say nothing. No, it isn't anything really, just sad dreams. The Information, a novel by Martin Amis, has gotten a lot of very good reviews. It has been attended by a lot of publicity about its coming. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.